Hey there. I wanted to share a story because I'm not very good at remembering facts and figures, and I get in a bit of trouble for posting things and not remembering all the facts. So I wanted to share a story. I've written it out. I'm just going to read it. It's a 3-part story, and this is part 1 and 2. Okay, so I hope you enjoy it. Today I'd like to share a story about a world throughout the ages. It would make the most incredible film because it really is the hero's journey on a massive scale, like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Game of Thrones, all those good ones. It is a story of good versus evil. It's a story in 3 parts, and today I will share part 1 and 2. Part 1, setting the scene. So we begin with the baddies, a group of 13 Phoenician families that are so powerful that they are running the world. They're not like us. They're rather like the pharaohs of Egypt, who consider themselves gods above us all. Just as the pharaohs used slaves to build their pyramids, these 13 families have continually used the people to create wealth and power for themselves. They have utter contempt and disdain for the people on the land, just as the pharaohs, who would not care if a slave died of exhaustion or was squashed by a stone block. There will always be more people to continue the work, an endless supply, in fact. Under these powerful families are the minions, who also crave power and money and will do anything to progress up the ranks to the top of the pile. And below this layer is another strata of equally ambitious players doing the bidding of those above. The only aim of this evil bunch is to make more money by making us work harder and pay taxes, to have more power and keep all the people under control. You should know that they are different to us. They have sold their souls to the devil, and they are dead inside. There is no limit to the depths of their depravity. But here is the twist in this epic tale. Although they hold us in contempt, they are wary of us too, because we, the 99%, have extraordinary gifts and powers, which they do not have. We have creativity running through us, which enables us to inspire, to create beauty through music, art, drama and sport. We are able to experience emotions and feelings that range from ecstatic joy to despair, to compassion and wonder, gratitude, happiness, sorrow, anger, rage, empathy, and so much more. We are connected to each other through a collective consciousness that also connects us to source energy, God, the universe, Allah, Buddha, whatever name we give the power that is beyond us and within us. We are connected to each other, but also to animals and to nature. We can see a view or hear a piece of music that brings us to tears. We feel a lot. Our feelings and emotions define our human experience. They do not feel. We can heal our bodies and the bodies of others through our thoughts and intentions. We can make water go from polluted to clean with meditation. We can overcome disease such as cancer with prayer. We have such incredible powers that we can tap into, many of which have only been discovered by a few, but available to us all if we only gave it some time. They have always known that we have these largely undiscovered powers, and so they focus their efforts to ensure we don't use them. In ancient times, indigenous people and tribes would use their incredible powers and wisdom. They would use the gifts of nature to heal, plants and herbs that were freely available and abundant. They would be village elders who shared mystical wisdom, witch doctors, wise old crones, all of whom passed down their knowledge and experience to the next generation. You can see how this wisdom and power would be a threat to those evil families that wanted to control the world's workforce. So over the centuries, these pockets of indigenous people were uprooted, turned into slaves, corrupted with alcohol, persecuted. Books containing the spiritual wisdom and the knowledge of natural remedies were burned, and particularly in the Western world, science was heralded as the new, more advanced, more sophisticated way forward. Now on to part 2, how they managed us in the 20th century. Now we will look at how these evil overlords that remain invisible to the people have managed to keep us oblivious and controlled. In more recent times, one of the wealthiest of the minions, an oil mogul, discovered that he could create drugs from petroleum. He created the pharmaceutical industry, realising quite quickly that this was going to be the greatest of all cash cows. He used some of the money to build medical colleges that taught medicine based on these pharmaceutical remedies. Soon, an entire generation of doctors was created that only knew of the Western medicines, and the natural plant-based solutions were forgotten or ridiculed. The added benefit was the cascade effect. A drug prescribed for a certain specific condition would lead to side effects that required additional medication to alleviate the symptoms, which may in turn have further side effects. And sometimes we would become dependent on these drugs for years of purchasing, guaranteed. So how else could this group control us and make more money? One of the most effective ways was by starting wars. They would sell arms to both sides, ensuring incredibly lucrative times and guaranteeing that they would be behind the winning side, whoever that was. And of course, people would die in huge numbers, ensuring that the population didn't overrun, and people would continue to remain in a state of fear, unable to tap into their place of serenity, their connection and their creativity. When wars weren't being used, terrorist attacks and deadly viruses were used frequently to escalate the fear and uncertainty and cause massive mistrust between us all. We were conditioned to be fearful of people who looked different or who had different faith. Even our sexual orientation became a threat, for example with AIDS. Prejudice and division set in and was continually encouraged and reinforced. The film industry was paid by them, so action films, war films, films about terrorist attacks, alien invasions were all used to program us to continually fear our neighbours, when in reality we know in our heart of hearts that the human beings are kind, and those who do exhibit malice are usually victims themselves. We were distracted and hoodwinked by the media who were in their pockets. We felt that we were superior to those nations with their obvious and overt propaganda, but all the while our version of the truth was being even more manipulated, and we soaked it all up, oblivious to the subterfuge. More distractions were needed as the population grew. We were becoming the many, and aware that we were always a threat to their power and position, they had to find ways of stopping us from connecting to source and to each other, and specifically to ourselves. Television, what a coup for them. By ensuring that we were working hard all day, it was easy to convince us that being entertained by our gogglebox was the perfect way to spend our free time and unwind. Programs were indeed programming, showing us how we should live, made us believe that our happiness was to be found outside of us. Adverts promoted our insecurities and self-loathing. We could never be happy unless we looked like that, or were successful as that, or owned that. It was a stroke of genius to make us all feel insecure and unworthy, so that we worked harder and harder to create more wealth for them. As with any operation, this was a multi-pronged attack. They also controlled us with our food, water and air. Food started to become more processed. E-numbers and chemical preservatives, pesticides on crops, tap water had chemicals added to it, aluminium in our deodorants, chemtrails poisoning the air we breathe, cleaning products that were carcinogenic, that affected the lungs if inhaled and could burn the skin. The organs in our body now had to work harder to find the nutrition we needed. Illnesses and disease would become the new norm and would lead us into the pharma train. Many of us now have high levels of heavy metals in our body too, which can be toxic. And let's not forget sugar. One of the leading factors in poor health, including obesity, heart disease, diabetes and cancer. Highly addictive and cheap, it became associated with treats for children, and then a lifetime of sugar consumption was virtually guaranteed. Finally, the vaccination program, sold to us as a solution to combat various diseases, but which additionally contained a cocktail of toxic substances that can have medium and long-term consequences. As you can see, they had every area of our lives pretty well covered. Before I move on to the climax of this tale, it is worth taking a cursory glance at the extent of the spider's web in which we are caught and the nature of the beast. It can be hard to conceive that a small group is controlling the entire world when we all live in separate countries with our own cultures, identities, and elected governments. How could they all be under the control of these elite evil few? The answer is that just with war, they are betting on both sides. In elections across the world, they would have sought out and groomed individuals to rise to power and be their man or woman on the inside. Some leaders of industry or politicians will be drawn to the power and money. Others will be victims of honeypot scandals, and with each act that they perform to get free, they are merely getting more entangled in the web. In order to climb further up the ladder, some will take the next step and cut themselves off from their last shred of humanity. Satanic acts may be required, rituals including the torture and sacrifice of children, as well as the drinking of their victims' blood. You can understand why I said at the beginning, they are not like us. Hundreds of thousands of children have gone missing each year for goodness knows how long. A word of warning, this rabbit hole should be entered with caution. Some things cannot be unseen. So now when we are at the point in our story where we have seen the breadth and depth of our enemies' reach, the lengths they will go to keep us in check, their plans to keep us unaware of our power and captive on the treadmill like slaves, you would be forgiven for believing that there is no chance of justice, no happy ending in sight. But as I said, this is an epic tale. A few white knights have shown their hand. In the 60s, an American president who vowed to take down these evil overlords and free the world of its criminal hold, he was shot, and that their man was put in his place. His brother took up the charge. He was shot too. You can see how gripping this story is. We don't even know we need a hero. We're just carrying on, living our lives, working, poisoning our bodies with their food, poisoning our mind with their propaganda. But there are some good guys amongst the bad. And there is hope despite the overwhelming evidence, because we are the 99% and we have incredible powers and the ability to feel, love and unite in compassion, something they cannot do. I hope you'll join me for part 3.